or from your own device. Okay. Now, before I go any further, just a quick show of hands in terms of iPhone users. As parents, yeah. So if you're an iPhone user, stick your hand up. Any Android users in here? Okay. Apologies, Android users, you are going to be completely out of luck as far as this goes, because unfortunately Apple makes it so that Apple only talks to Apple, and there is no way to do any of this on an Android device. If you've got another iPad at home, you can do it, and also you can do what I'm going to show you on your child's device, but it's quite handy if you've got your own Apple device to be able to manage it remotely. Now, before I get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the issues surrounding screen time. I want to look at some of the ways in which you currently manage screen time, a very brief chat about social media, and then ultimately, which is what I think you're looking for, is how to use iOS 12 parent controls to manage your children's screen time. Apologies for the fact that the Apple TV seems to be flickering. Apple released a bunch of updates over the course of the night, which has caused this problem, and I keep going around and fixing it. So if that suddenly restarts, that's I do apologise. So, anybody recognise that? Anyone want to own up? Do your children play this? Not yet. Okay. It doesn't matter whether it's this, whether it's Minecraft. Is that a popular one? Yeah. Any others? FIFA? Can you get FIFA for the iPad?
Oh no.
Okay.
It's not on. No.
Yeah. I think FIFA's console. Anyway, but this is huge. You know, parents. I mean, all over the world, children all over the world play it. 125 million people played it since it's launched in 2017. The thing is, the reason why I put this up is because it is just a fad. It's a fad like Minecraft was a fad a few years ago. It's a fad like Game Boys were a fad 15 years ago. You know, these things do come and go. So I don't want to get hung up particularly on specific apps, but I do want to sort of draw your attention to the fact that if it's not this, it's something else. And it will come and go along with many other things. I don't know if anybody's seen this. I forget her name. I should know it because she's Super Nanny, isn't she?
No,
Anyone come across this?
Allsop.
So Kirsty Allsop, that's it. Anybody see her in the news recently? It wasn't recently, it was about last year. She got into a lot of trouble for tweeting that she basically smashed her child's iPad because she got so frustrated with it. I'll just let you watch this.
As far as games and parenting goes, we have to stop our kids playing these games. It is really very, very simple, and we're not taking enough responsibility for that. All of us, collectively. I mean, Karis is probably a much better mum than I am. But I'll say this is the first time I've said this publicly. In June, I smashed my kids' iPads. Not in a violent way.
With a hammer?
No, I actually banged them on the table leg.
Wow.
That's it. I said, there's this game called...
Serious?
Yes, there's a game called Fortnite and another called PUBG. And I decided that we'd made all sorts of rules and all sorts of times when we've said you can't play them, this... All of those rules got broken, and in the end, I said, right, that's it. I have to physically...
You took them, and it was sideways motion, two-hander.
It was remarkably easy.
Go on.
But the second...
She was
I just
I would love to do this.
I just
It's like that, right?
Do you know what?
My goodness.
I didn't intend to speak about it, but
This
it's
is
come up
amazing.
now. These games... Yes.
That's up to them that you did it.
No,
Oh my God, it's going to be Mary Hill, we need it all.
What about their smartphones and the
They
computers?
don't have
myriad
smartphones.
gadgets.
They don't have smartphones at all.
We also had a Kirsty Allsop moment where she just happened to say, it wasn't even prompted by me, she just sort of came out with this idea that she'd smashed her kids' iPads. And have you ever been tempted?
Oh gosh, yeah. So when we were on holiday a number of years ago, the girls were little. It wasn't iPads, it was Game Boys. And I remember saying to the girls, right, you can have the Game Boys on for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, an hour early evening. And literally the holiday was ruined by the fact that they could not get off these Game Boys. It was all day. They didn't even want to go swimming. They, particularly my middle daughter, Jenny, she was almost addicted, obsessed by this Game Boy. And I wish I'd done what Kirsty had done. I wish I'd picked them up and chucked them in the swimming pool, because that would have made the holiday.
Because they might as well not be on holiday if they're just on screen.
Constantly said you can do that when we get home. You know, you can do it on the plane, you can sit in your Game Boy whenever you want, but not on holiday. We've paid to come on this lovely holiday, and all you're doing is sitting on your Game Boy.
sort of have a love-hate relationship with that bit. Because I think it makes some good points, but Jeremy Vine is a bit controversial. He likes to sort of stir things up a little bit. And I suppose the point I wanted to make with regards to that is about the second clip. Okay, and because she said, I have a problem with my children using Game Boys. Now, I don't know if anybody goes back that far, but the Game Boy came out in 1989, so we're talking about 20 years ago now. So again, this isn't something which is new. It's been around for a long time. I'm not sure smashing your child's iPad is particularly the way forward, and thankfully now we have screen time controls, it no longer is an issue. But ultimately it does come down to, if you want your children to not use their iPads, probably the best thing to do is take it away from them as opposed to smash it, hopefully. Okay, so who's to blame for all of this? Let me go back to this. Do we blame the children? Do we blame the technology? Do we blame the makers of the technology? I mean, the thing is, technology has been specifically designed to keep us hooked. Autoplay, likes, notifications. You know, if you sit and look at your phone, if you use WhatsApp and it's sitting there with that little ... while you're waiting for the message to come through, that is designed to keep you waiting for something to come through, because you know it's coming. You send a text message, you don't know whether the other person's messaging you or not, so you kind of put it down. But you wait for this thing to come up. Oh, it's going to, oh, they're online. Oh, they're online. I'm going to get a message in a minute. I'm going to wait. And before you know it, it comes through and you're in a conversation. Netflix. You know, Netflix is lining you up for the next episode before the credits of the last one have even finished. You know, you're sitting there and it's going, do you want to watch the next one? Oh, yes, too good. Gotta go. You know. So, and technology, phones particularly, they are designed to keep us hooked. Netflix, YouTube, all of this stuff, you know, it affects us as adults. Is it any surprise that it affects our children? So, just to get a quick feel, have a chat amongst yourselves. What are the biggest challenges between you of managing and monitoring your child's screen time? Have a chat amongst yourselves and then feel free to shout out.
Saying no.
Yeah.
Basically always saying no. Or can you get off? You've been on there an hour. Can you get off?
Okay, yeah. And they say no.
And it's only once it's kind of like that transition period of saying it down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
no, but this what happened to him now. It's educational.
Well, when it's been an hour,
Because he's
for me,
allowed
it's
to
an hour or
watch
so.
serious
It's
screen
okay.
time, but then
But that
he's allowed
transition
to
of
watch
making something away,
the Dutch news, the children's bulletin. And it's, no, but I'm watching this news.
Yeah.
No, but now I'm watching. And he would
Yeah.
watch these history.
If it's any consolation, my children both do that when I have to switch the television off, so it's not just iPads, it is a range of content.
Yeah. Or I'm looking this up.
I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to throw out some challenges? I know one that you mentioned over here was about your husband being the worst, and I'll come back to that shortly. But you know, we have to look at our own behaviour as well, because my children come up to me and they're like, "Daddy, Daddy," and I'm like, "Just a minute, just one second. Let me send this text message." What sort of example am I setting as a parent when I'm doing that? You know, and I'm sure that there are a number of people who are also guilty of the same thing. Does the quality or the content of type of screen time activity change? If they are reading a book on their iPads as opposed to playing Fortnite, is that okay?
Yeah.
Depends what the book's about.
Sorry? Depends what the book's about. Yeah.
That's how, because we just moved in here new, and my kids, they really love reading, so I have not gotten in store
Yeah.
to start getting their books, and
Okay.
things haven't arrived, things we should need. So with that, they will tell you, "Oh, Mom, I'm done playing, I'm now reading."
Yeah.
So how do I just tell them like 1 hour is okay, but they'll be like, "Mom, I'm in chapter this and this." So how do you control that? So because it's really an issue for me.
Yeah.
During a holiday, they love reading, so
Okay.
they're always on the screen. Oh,
Yeah.
mommy, you know.
But is that wrong? Is there an issue with
It's
that?
not wrong, but I still feel that it's because they're reading books, but I still feel that the screen time has to be reduced. So most times I stop them.
Okay, but specifically, why? That's what I'm struggling to understand.
Is it not the screen effect before bedtime and the blue screens?
Okay, yeah, so that is one.
2 hours before
That's
bed,
one.
and that's when they want to read.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but the problem you've got with this is that you can find research to pretty much back up any sort of argument. I mean, yes, generally it's widely understood that blue light before bedtime keeps you awake. But then equally there was a study done fairly recently where they did it on 16-year-olds and said that blue light right up to bedtime had virtually no impact on their sleep. Equally, you could say, you know, is it blue light or is it the flashing colours and the twitching from playing a game winding you up, putting you into a stress state where you then aren't able to get to sleep? You know, I mean, I bought a Kindle with an e-ink display. You know, it's still a device, it's still shining light into my eyes, but I don't seem to have any trouble sleeping. If I sit and play a computer game until 10 o'clock at night, then I have trouble sleeping. So the question is, you know, just because they're looking at a screen doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect their sleep. It's more about what they're doing with it, I think. And the other thing is, don't forget, you can also, most devices, iPads particularly, will let you switch off the blue light, so you just get a more sort of orange glow. Does that have an impact? Is it something to think about? But on the whole, is there a difference between something like reading and playing games on a device, or are we dead set on the screen issue?
Eyesight, is there not
Eyesight?
scientific
Are you not better off buying a
evidence that
Kindle?
eyesight is...
You know, yeah, I mean, you could be, but then equally you say, okay, eyesight, so you have a Kindle or you have a screen, or you sit...
That from an ophthalmologist's point of view, all screens, because you're not exercising your eyes.
But couldn't you say the same about holding a book in front of your face?
Yes, you could.
So again, I'm just sort of, you know...
But it's about the addictive nature. You probably aren't going to sit and hold a book for 3 hours, are you? Whereas the kids will be on the screen until you force them.
But that's, again, down to the activity though, isn't it? If they were reading a book on a screen, would they be sitting there for 3 hours, or would they have flicked over to YouTube 10 minutes later? So, hopefully I'll give you some things that will address a lot of this. It is about taking a Goldilocks approach, not too much, not too little. And this is something we try to focus on, certainly in computing lessons at school as well, is it is about finding a balance, and we all need to find a balance. You know, I always say, barring some sort of Walking Dead event where everybody turns into zombies, can you actually imagine a world with less technology? Or are we likely to live in a world with more technology? You know, this isn't a problem which is going to go away, it's a problem which is going to escalate. So we have to prepare children to be able to deal with it. And a really big part of that is finding a balance between what is appropriate technology use. And a lot of that comes from having a conversation. But just before that, you know, I mean, I know some parents will say, no, I'm not going to give my child a device up to a certain age, and then the school says, yeah, we're going to give them a device, and that changes it all completely for you. But how do you monitor screen time during Playdates? If somebody goes over to somebody else's house, how do you know what they're doing?
You just assume that they're on a screen.
Yeah? I mean, one of the reason why I put this in is because at my last school, as one of my colleagues said that she sent, and my last school was in Malaysia. In Malaysia, they don't seem to have any sort of concept about what is appropriate in terms of media. So, you know, you can go to the cinema and you can watch an 18 rated film where all the kissing will be cut out of it, but it will have blood, guts, gore and violence, and a 12-year-old sitting next to you loving it, you know. And one of my colleagues sent her daughter, who was only, I think, 7 or 8, round to a friend's house, and they all watched Annabelle, which is a horror film, you know. And she had no idea. If she knew that they were going to be watching that, she wouldn't have sent her daughter along. But you don't know. Different parents have different expectations as to what is appropriate. Malaysian culture is very much, you know, it's imaginary, it's violent, it's on screen, it's imaginary, but we're going to cut the kissing out of it. So, you know, how do you monitor it at home? How do you know that your children aren't going around to a friend's house and playing Grand Theft Auto? Are they?
No,
on, but just ask what they have done.
Yeah. Okay.
Just talk about
Yeah.
what they thought. Yeah.
And again, I think this comes back to having a conversation. I'll talk about that again more in a
You
second.
don't think kids are very much influenced by what the friends do. So if the other parents don't have as much control over their kids, then it affects your kid because your kid's going to, well, she didn't do it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why haven't I got this? Why
Yeah.
can't I do it?
Some families do that, and some families do this.
And I think as long as you're in a situation where you can say, you can have that conversation with your children, and you can say, look, you know, they may do that, but it isn't appropriate, and here's why. Then hopefully we're encouraging them to think about it a bit more logically. This is key to everything that I say in any of these workshops, because at the end of the day, your children will have access to technology without you being there at some point. I used to do courses in the UK, and I did a course for about the computing curriculum for a bunch of different schools, and they all came along. There was a lady on the course, and she said, is there anything that I can do in this course that isn't online? Because a lot of the resources that we were using for the course were online. And I said, well, to be honest, not really. Why do you ask? And she said, well, I work at a Jewish convent school, and they're not allowed onto the internet until they're 16. A Jewish Orthodox school, sorry. And they said they weren't allowed on the internet until they were 16. And I was talking to her at lunchtime, and I said, well, what happens when these girls get to 16? She was like, they're going mad. They're all over it. They can't control themselves. They're on the internet for like 14 hours a day, just exploring. So again, you know, we've got with the early you start, we have to start training our children to be able to handle it. And it's not about scaring them, it's about empowering them to discuss the issues, to come to you and talk about what they've seen, to talk about what they do, so that you can hopefully advise them. And a lot of that will come from research on your behalf. And I just want to introduce this, which is Common Sense Media. Has anybody come across this before? Yes. Okay. Common Sense Media is your go-to place for realistic ratings about anything to do that you can find on tablets. So if you want to go and get a realistic aging, so I mean, for example, this is TikTok, this is a social media platform. They say it's 16. I'd categorically agree with that. Parents say 14, kids say 12. You can go and look at any movie, book, website, social media platform. It's all there, and it will give you that information. And it will tell you what you're likely to find. Now, TikTok, yes, it can be used for various things. It used to be called music.ly, but music.ly has such a reputation for having inappropriate content on it, they changed it to TikTok. Hasn't changed, still got a ton of inappropriate content on it, but it's a rebrand, and kids do use it. So you need to know what they're doing, you need to look this stuff up, find out your information about it, and Common Sense Media is a really good place to do that. YouTube comments as well, you can turn things off in the privacy settings on your computer. It's not infallible. As soon as you log out of YouTube, those settings go away, unfortunately. But you can put parent controls and things like that. But it really does come from doing your research. This is the law. This is my personal belief. Okay, if you're under 13, basically, you are not. Children should not have access to social media. Does anybody want to?
Does that include YouTube?
For viewing YouTube, it's 13 and over. For publishing to YouTube, it's 18 and over. Off the top of my head.
That's the first thing all kids want to see is YouTube.
Yeah.
So what defines a social media account? Because nowadays a lot of the games are interactive, and
yeah, I know, it's a very blurry line.
Isn't there?
Yeah, I think if you probably read somewhere in the terms and conditions of Fortnite, you'd probably find something relating to chat features being 13 and up, but not having read the terms and conditions of Fortnite, I don't know. But, you know, I mean, we can say this all we want, but at the end of the day, if our children are determined, how many parents know that their kids have got social media accounts? Put your hand up if you know your kid's got a social media account. Yeah, put your hand up if you think your child might have a social media account but they haven't told you about it. Anybody want to own up to that? I mean, you know, the thing is, again, we don't have control. You can go, they may well go to a friend's house and set up a social media account that you aren't aware of.
But I know they don't now, but I know that they started playing a game called Roblox.
Yeah.
And I looked on and she had like 40 friends, and I was like, who are these friends? And we had a conversation about these were all people she didn't know.
Yeah.
And she ended up, of her own volition, after we had the conversation, deleting them all. She's got 3 friends that she knows from school now. But I didn't know that that was on there.
I mean, most games nowadays, Roblox is one of them, Fortnite's another, you do have the ability to communicate in the games themselves. So again, but you don't know about these until they come along and your kids say, oh, I'm playing this because it's really popular at school, and then you look into it and then you find out they've got friends. So again, it comes down to having these conversations with our children and making sure that they understand what the implications are of having friends online or having chat conversations within these games.
But we have a cloud, and before they download any app, they have to ask for permission.
Yeah, I'll come back.
And we exactly know what they have and what they are using.
Yeah, I'm going to show you that now, so you're clearly already using it. So these are the 2 tools which we're going to look at from this point onwards, okay? Now, we have school-issued devices. You cannot download games under the self-service on a school iPad, okay? This is called Jamf Parent, and this is for managing control of apps that are installed by the school. Now, I can't really imagine that spending a bunch of time on Google Drive or Google Docs is going to be a massive issue, so I am going to more or less skip over that for this and focus more on the iOS 12 screen time controls, because obviously we don't give children iTunes accounts, but I can imagine that many children have got iTunes accounts or have other iPads at home that have iTunes accounts on. And you can use this irrespective of whether it is a school account or not, a school device or not. If you are not logged in to an iTunes account on that device, then this won't work. But then equally, they won't be able to download any apps either, so it's kind of a moot point. So we're going to look at iOS 12 screen time controls. I'll put a video in here which will walk you through everything that I'm going to show you now. So don't worry about trying to memorize all of this stuff, but I'm just going to flick over to my iPad and show you what this looks like. So there are two sort of approaches to this. Okay, you've got something called restrictions and screen time controls, which basically take away your child's ability to do stuff. You've got something called family sharing, which is a way to give back some of that autonomy, some of that independence. So they can look for apps, they can buy things, but you have to approve them all. Now, if I go into the settings on this iPad, you'll see that I'm logged in as Fred Blogs. Okay, that's my child. And you can do this on your child's iPad. So if you're on an Android device, okay, you can take your child's device and you can do it on the device. You don't have to do this remotely. I'll come back to the remote stuff in a second. But if I go down here, you'll see I've got this thing called screen time. And if I click on that one, okay, this is quite a nice one. If you've got your own iPhone, you can have a look at screen time. It might give you a few home truths about how long you do spend on WhatsApp. But there are a few things in here which are really useful. So you can schedule downtime. Did I set mine? No, I set the code for this. This is a code that you set and you don't tell your children. Hopefully I've got it right. Excuse me. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can turn on downtime. Now you can only set one period of downtime, unfortunately, but that downtime you can set, let's say, from 6:30 in the evening. Okay, and I'm going to end it at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and blocking the device will basically disable pretty much everything. So if I set that, when I get to 6:30, my iPad it won't lock itself, but it will only give you access to things like the phone. Basically the emergency features, it won't give you access to anything else. So between 6:30 and 7 o'clock, this iPad gets locked down. You can also set something called app limits, okay, and And Apple basically categorizes these. It doesn't give you access to specific apps, unfortunately, it just gives you access to categories of apps. So for example, if I go into games, you'll see it says Fortnite there, and that's because Fortnite's the only game I've got installed on this device. But if I click social networking as well, it says, so that includes messages, FaceTime, and one more. I'm not sure what that is. You click on the next button, and then you can set a time limit. Okay, now it does take a bit of setup for this, because you've got to think about realistically what you're going to do for them. So for example, on Monday I am going to give them, you cannot set 0 minutes. Don't ask me why. I'm going to give them 1 minute on Monday of games and social media. On Tuesday I'll give them 1 minute of games and social media. On Saturday I will give them 1 hour of games and social media, and you go through like that, customizing each of the times. Now I did question why it was done like this before, but actually if you think about it, it probably makes a lot of sense. Because if you give your children 1 hour of something at a weekend, it is up to them to decide how they manage their time. They may get up in the morning and go, right, Fortnite, way, and then an hour later, that's it, they can't use it again for the rest of the day. Okay, so hopefully by using that, they are sort of being taught to manage their time a little bit more effectively. So that is choosing the apps. Okay, I'll just come out of that for a sec. You can choose what apps you want to always allow. So for example, I'm going to remove messaging, I'm going to remove FaceTime, I'm going to remove maps, but I'm going to give them access to, what have I got on here, books. There we go. So they can have their books anytime they like. You can also add the school apps in there as well. The thing I would say is to be careful of is if you do start applying app limits, try to make sure that you exclude the school apps, otherwise you're probably going to get a child coming to the office and going, I can't access any of my work because my parents have locked down Google Drive. So try to just bear the school apps in mind when you're setting this up. Now the other one which is quite useful is content and privacy restrictions. And if you go through this, the one that I think is, well, the two that are probably the most useful, where is it? Yeah, so iTunes and App Store purchases. You see here you've got install apps, delete apps, and in-app purchases. First of all, I would say definitely don't allow in-app purchases. Installing apps, if I just show you what this looks like for a sec. So if I go to the App Store, you see I've got the App Store here. Okay, now before I talked about what happens if you want to take away the privilege to be able to do things. If I go into settings, content and privacy restrictions, iTunes store purchases, I'm going to disable the ability to install apps. And if I go back, you'll see the App Store's disappeared altogether. So they can't search for apps, they can't install apps, they literally can't do anything. So if you've got a school-owned device and you don't want them to be able to install their own apps on there, you would go into settings, you go into screen time, content and privacy restrictions, and then you would switch the ability to install apps off.
Does that only apply if they've got an iTunes?
No, that will work.
How can they, but they're not allowed to install apps anyway without?
Well, yeah, so it's kind of, it's a moot point.
Unless they've got their own
Unless they've got their own iTunes account. And they can create their own iTunes account. So, sorry? There are ways to do it without a card, yeah, which will let you get a free app. So if you go into the App Store and try and purchase a free app, it will then make you create an account, but it will let you get past the part where you have to put a credit card in. And if you look at online how to open an iTunes account without a credit card, there's loads of guides and the kids will all follow those. So, okay, so the other stuff in here that's quite useful is if you have got Messenger, for example, iMessage, and I don't think I've got it on here at the moment. Is it there? FaceTime, for example, if I go into that, now I'm already logged into FaceTime, but if you go to settings, messages and FaceTime, and I'm going to switch iMessage off, switch FaceTime off. Okay, if I go back into, where has it gone? Screen time, inappropriate content, and then I switch off this one at the bottom which says allow changes to accounts, so don't allow. That will then prevent them from logging back into iMessage. So you've effectively disabled iMessage on the device as well. Now it's a bit of a workaround, unfortunately, because there is no way to actually disable iMessage particularly on there, but if you follow those steps then it will do that. There's a whole load of other stuff in here that's worth having a look through. The only thing I would suggest bearing in mind just is content restrictions. Now you can go through this and you can change it to whatever you want. So I want content restrictions are clean, music profiles off, films up to the age of 12, TV programs up to the age of 12. The only thing I would say about this is that it only applies to stuff that's purchased through the iTunes store. It doesn't apply to Netflix, it doesn't apply to YouTube, it doesn't apply to a video that's been uploaded to the device from somewhere else. And the only other thing I would be careful of is this web content. And when they're in school, web content is restricted. And if you go to limit adult websites, you'd think, yeah, that makes absolute sense. But Apple, in its wisdom, has decided that Wikipedia is adult content, and therefore if you switch that on, you cannot get onto Wikipedia. I know a lot of parents who do it, and most of the kids don't have an issue with it, but it's just something to bear in mind. They may come back to you and say, I can't get onto Wikipedia. Now, if you want to set up screen time, you can do all of that on your child's device. Okay? What you can also do, if you have your own device, I'm just going to switch over to my iPhone now for a sec. Okay. So if I go to settings on my iPhone, okay, it looks more or less the same. Can I turn it that way? No. It looks more or less the same as the iPad one. And if I go into my account at the top here, you can see that I have got, and it's just going to take a second to load up, hopefully. Oh no, yeah, there we go. So you can see down here I've got family sharing Fred. That's this iPad I was just using here. Okay, so if you want to create an account for your child, an iTunes account, if they've got their own, they will probably have lied about their date of birth unless they're over the age of 13. Okay, you cannot bring that account under family sharing unless you can get them to log in and change the date of birth. What I would suggest you do is add a family member, and then you see you've got down here, create a child account. So I would go through that process of creating an Apple ID for them, which is then under your family sharing account, and that way you get control over their account. I'm not going to go through that process, it's fairly straightforward. You just click create a child account, follow it through, create them an ID, and then you would log in to their iPad using the ID you've just created. And what that will look like is you then should see your child showing up under your device there. Okay? So if I go into my child, no, I'm in the wrong place. I'm just going to come out to that for a sec. So I'm going to go to screen time. Okay, and there you can see is my child's device. I can go into that, and you've got exactly the same controls I just showed you that were on their device. The advantage of this is, and if I just go back to this device, talk about app hopping, there we go. Okay, so the advantage of this is, you can see there I've got Fortnite on. So on my phone, I'm going to go into, what should we do? I'll tell you what, I'm going to go into Downtime, and I'm going to set the downtime to now, and we can see what that looks like. So what time is it? So 9, 15, 2, and 30. Right, there. Okay. So there you go. Everything's just disappeared. Alright, so all I've got access to now is the clock, the settings, find my iPhone. Notice the browser's still active. Hopefully, if I've done this right, it will put a block on that as well.
I think the people smashed the iPad.
Okay, there you go. So I'm in the browser and it says you've reached your time limit. Okay, so that's what downtime looks like on the child's device. And again, if I just turn off downtime now, oh, come out of that. There you go. And now they've all appeared again. Okay. If I go into app limits, add a limit. Let's get rid of games next. I'm going to give them no. Is it going to let me do that? No, it's not. 1 minute. It's so annoying. Okay, so I'll just put 1 minute on there for games. 5 minutes remaining for games today. Right, let's go into Fortnite.
So they get the warning, do they?
Yeah.
That when we get shouted, Mum.
Yes. I'll just leave that running there for the minute and hopefully that should shut itself down in a sec. So the other thing that's quite handy about the downtime one is you can change it on the fly if you're doing it from your own phone. So if they say to you set a time limit, say okay you've got 1 hour on your device and they're not adhering to that 1 hour, you can then say okay fair enough, I'm just going to lock it now, and you can go through with your own device and it will disable their iPad. So you've got exactly the same options you had before, so always allowed, apps, content and privacy restrictions. I'm hoping that this is going to go off any minute now.
Can you do this from a Mac?
You can't, unfortunately.
No. PS4. My son plays Fortnite.
PS4 has parent controls built into the device itself, but you would have to go through into the settings and add the parent controls from there. Most consoles nowadays do come with parent controls. Are you gonna shut off? It's possible because I haven't created an account in here. It's not gonna count it yet. But anyway, so I'll come back to that in a minute. We can try it again in a sec. So one other thing was which I said on here. App Store. Okay, so I can turn the App Store back on. So if I switch allow installing of apps on, you'll see the App Store just appeared there on their device. Okay, and again, I can just disallow, and it disappears. Allow, and it will show up again. Okay, just go back to that. Is it going to? There's one other thing I wanted to talk. Ah, yes, right. So the only other thing I wanted to mention quickly was with regards to family sharing. Okay, so if you have a child, if you remember I showed you that Fred Blogs is under my account, okay? If I go into the App Store as a child and I try and purchase something, so let's try and find something that isn't going to cost me. Just give me something free. Okay, so I'm going to purchase that Deliciously Ella app. There we go. Oh God. Me. Okay, so what should happen now is it will say, oh, okay, I want to install this app, and it'll pop up on this device saying a request to get Deliciously Ella app has been sent to your parent or guardian. So if I now go back to my iPhone, okay, I'm going to click ask on this iPad, and what will happen is I should get a message through in a sec. There you go. So request from Fred. Fred would like to get this app. Click on that one. Deliciously Ella. No, sorry fella, you're not having that. There you go. Okay. And then I've got to put my password in again, which I'm not going to do. But so you get the idea, okay? If you click accept, it will automatically download onto their device. But that gives you the opportunity just to be able to review what it is that they're actually buying, and also whether it's going to cost you money. Okay, the other thing I would say about that, and I said it before, is having family sharing is not about taking away control, it's about giving some of it back again. So if you want to, let's say, you know, I don't feel like I can trust you to purchase apps in this way, then you would disable the App Store altogether like I just showed you. If you did want to be able to give them some of that control back, you'd put them under family sharing, and then they would have to ask permission to buy an app. But don't forget what I said, this does not work if they are logged in using their own iTunes account. You need to create one using the family sharing feature on your device. Okay?
So you can't add an existing account to family sharing unless it's...
You can, but they have to be under a certain age, and they have to know the date of birth
when
that they
get
put
to
in.
30, does that mean they get full autonomy there?
No, I think it's 18 that it leaves your family sort of
but they
account.
can't join the account?
I don't think so, no. I have, I mean, you can try.
They lie.
I have come across, I have parents who have tried to work through the process where a child has put in a fake date of birth, and we've gone into the account, changed it to the correct date of birth, and then tried to add it, and it still didn't work. So the easiest way is just to create them a new Apple ID.
Is there a way to get screen time to work for two kids who share an iPad? Without having to like log in and out of different IDs maybe, or is there an easy way to do it?
Well, if you share an iPad, do you do that now? Do you log in and out of Apple IDs?
No, because they're young, you know, so.
I'm not sure I understand.
So, yeah, so I set time limits for them, but they're like, he used all my time, you know, and
okay.
Is there an easier way to do it?
Yeah, no,
I don't think so.
They would have to log out of their iTunes account,
right,
and then log in with another iTunes account, in which case you could set two sets of limits,
right,
but you would be up to the child, and you would have to say, right, well, you get to log out your brother's one and log in using your own, and then you'll have your time back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you'd have to manage it that way effectively. Okay.
So we do that for kids, because there's 3 years difference between them. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll send this presentation out, but I have put a video in here where you get to, in this video where you get to listen to me for 15 minutes talk about what I've just talked about for the last 15 minutes. But anyway, so just real quick in terms of more control, okay? Obviously you've got all of that stuff on the iPad, but I know that a contentious issue can be internet use at home, and there are a number of tools that I can suggest. One that I have recommended for a long time is NetNanny, and NetNanny's quite good. It's about $50 a year, but you get up to 5 devices that you can add to it. And basically what NetNanny does is it filters your internet, but will also allow you to log into a web portal where you can see what they've been looking at. And it doesn't matter if your kid's savvy and they know how to clear the history on their browser, that will tell you the actual story. The only caveat I would say with this, and this is an Apple thing, is that Apple doesn't allow your internet traffic to go through what's effectively categorized as something that monitors your device. So they make you use the NetNanny browser. And the NetNanny browser can be a little bit of a stigma for a child when they come into school and tell their friends, go, your mum makes you use NetNanny. So that can cause an issue in itself. The other thing, and I'm not going to get into this now, is configuring your router. Okay, and I know it's complicated and everybody's sitting going, oh my god. There are parent controls built into most routers, which if you are savvy enough and you look through your documentation from your internet provider, you can get in there and set parent controls on your router. I wouldn't, they are a little bit more technical than perhaps NetNanny is, which is why I tend to lean towards that one. The other thing is you just unplug it at the end of the day, maybe.
Take away the charger.
Take away what? The phone charger?
For the device.
Okay, yeah.
That's the biggest penalty for her.
So there are other ways to do it. One other thing which I know that some parents do quite like, which I have mentioned before, it does come up in these workshops quite a lot. I'm just going to go back to this again. So sometimes a child might come to you and say, but I've got homework to do, it's going to take me 20 minutes, I need access to X app while I do my homework. So what you can do is you can say, okay, right, I'm going to go into the settings, I'm going to go to general, and I'm going to go to, it's buried in here, I might not even be in the right place, accessibility, and at the bottom here you've got this thing called guided access. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to set a passcode, and this is a passcode that only you know. Don't tell your child what the passcode is, okay? And so they come to you and they say, okay, I need to get onto Fortnite to do my homework for 20 minutes. Okay, so you're going to say, okay, right, you can go on Fortnite, and I'm going to triple click the home button, 1, 2, 3. And it will pop into this guided access thing. So you can go to start. No, sorry. Let me just do that again. Because I missed a step. Sorry, you're going to go to options down here. I'm going to give you a time limit. And your time limit is 20 minutes. And you can do this with any app on the device, not just Fortnite. Okay, I'm going to resume screen time. And it says your guided access has started. You've got 20 minutes. And I can't exit the app. If I try, it gives me that passcode, and unless I know the passcode, I can't get out of it. So I'm going to cancel that. Nothing works. I'm literally locked into Fortnite for 20 minutes. Triple click the home button, and if you go past the 20 minutes, it'll just lock the device entirely. Okay, put the code in, and now we've released that iPad back to its normal use. Okay, so that's in settings, general, accessibility, and then guided access at the bottom there. And to get into it, you triple click. Okay. Alright, so just to summarise, a couple of things to be aware of. Nothing in the tech world is infallible. This is why I really try and enforce the point that you've got to have these conversations. You can spend a fortune on filtering, you can learn every trick there is, and I can guarantee you that your children will find ways around it. You know, you put NetNanny on all your computers, and if you start typing how to get around NetNanny, you've probably got hundreds of different websites will pop up with guides, and to be honest, NetNanny's pretty secure really, showing them how to get around it. Children have already found that they can download older games bypassing any time limits you have set if they go to the App Store, and if they uninstall it and then go to the App Store and reinstall it, that will get around that one. Check their clocks. They've discovered that by changing the clock on their device they can work around the hours of downtime. I was hoping that they'd have fixed that with iOS 13, but they haven't. So just don't tell them about that. But again, these are tools we can use, but they are not infallible. And this is really key for us as users of technology as well. You know, it doesn't matter whether you've got an iPhone, you've got what's it called on here? Screen time on iPhone. It's called digital well-being on an Android phone. But it basically does the same thing. a really nice exercise is to sit down with your family. And I did this with one of my IT classes as well. So try sitting down as a family and write down what you think you spend on an app. And don't do it just in terms of this. Think about, well, if I watch Netflix on my television, or if I spend time on WhatsApp on my computer, you've got to try and incorporate that into it as well. If you're on a Mac and you're logged in, Screen Time will incorporate your Mac usage as well, as long as you're logged in with the same iTunes account. But write down your estimated screen time, go away for a week, make sure this is switched on your devices, go away for a week and then come back and actually look at it together as a family and say, how correct am I? How much time, am I right when I think I only spend 5 minutes a day on WhatsApp? Because that will tell you how much time you spend on WhatsApp. And it can be an interesting thing to do as a family just to start that conversation. So last of all, it really does come down to taking your pulse, the pulse of your family's media use. This is completely up to you. My general feeling is not all screen time is created equal. I would much rather my children be sitting reading a book than watching YouTube. Not that my children can read yet, but anyway. Consider limiting screen time, but again, it only works if you provide a range of non-screen based opportunities, and we're in such a great place for that because you can just go out. You know, where I used to live in Malaysia, you'd be clagged in with smog on a daily basis, you know, and it would be unhealthy to go outside. But here, there's so many opportunities. We've got to look at our own behaviour. I think categorically no devices before bed, no devices in bedrooms is another good one. And if you lay those laws down right from the start, it is easier to do that. But again, it does come down to discussing the implications of both device use, social media with children. That you've got to have these conversations, because if we're not talking about it, we don't know what's going on. Okay. So that's it from me. We've got about a couple of minutes left. I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions, but thanks for coming, and I hope that was useful.
Thank you.